Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson, your host for Women in Business, a show that celebrates women and their accomplishments as entrepreneurs or senior managers. As a woman business owner for over 5 decades, I take great pride in bringing these interviews to you. I'm also president of the SOB clubs, so if any of you are interested in joining one in your area, please let me know. My guest today is Nadine Vogel, and she is CEO of Springboard Consulting, LLC, a global company working with national and multinational corporations, governments, and agencies around the world to successfully mainstream disability in the global workforce, workplace, and marketplace. Springboard also produces the world-renowned Disability Matters Conference and Awards. Nadine is the author of Dive In, Springboard into the Profitability, Productivity, and Potential of the Special Needs Workforce, a highly acclaimed, must-read business book. Welcome, Nadine.
Thank you very much.
Well, you've got an interesting background and an interesting family. So tell us a little bit about yourself personally and your family.
So I have two children. They're ages 24 and 16, both of whom have special needs. Been married for 30 years to my junior high school sweetheart, and run this company called Springboard. It's been around for 10 years and spent 20 plus years in corporate before that.
So did having special needs children temper you going into business? Is that what kind of started you on your path?
Yes and no. What started me on this path was when I was in corporate, I started a division of the company to educate families on planning for the future when they have children with special needs. And it became one of the most profitable divisions in that company's history. And we ran it, and what ended up happening was it became so successful, we took it to different parts of the company. And one day my CEO approached me and wanted to know why I hadn't started my own company when I had this idea, why I brought it to them, and my answer was that I hadn't thought of it. And that started the path. And 2 years later, my CEO retired and I started Springboard.
Amazing. That's quite interesting. There's a similar industry with a comparison with what I did and what happened to you. Your CEO retired and you started a business. And when I sold my companies, several of my instructors, because I had a chain of career schools, several of my instructors started their own businesses, but nobody did it while I was still in business. And but you decided not to buy the company you were working for?
No, it's a large global insurance company. I think that would have been almost impossible.
Ah, okay. Well, that tells us a little bit about your company. But what about the conferences that you run?
So the conferences, we have one in North America, one in Europe, one in Asia. Disability Matters in North America has been taking place we're going on our 10th year. It's about 350 corporate executives focused on the issues of mainstreaming people with disabilities, whether from a workforce, a workplace, or a marketplace standpoint. And there's an awards component as well. And every year, all three events move to different parts of the world or in the country. Different companies host it at their headquarters.
That's exciting. So where did you do your last one?
The North America one this year was in Boston. EMC hosted it. I just got back from Europe. Shell hosted our Europe event in The Hague. And then our Asia event is taking place in 7 weeks in Bangkok in Thailand.
Well, now, let me ask you, since you are worldwide, you're global, what are the differences in the various countries? I mean, how are special needs and people with disabilities treated differently in the various countries and the various regions where you are, compared to what happens here in the U.S.? Are we ahead? Are we behind? Tell us a little bit about that.
So it's a very interesting question. When I travel outside the U.S., people approach me all the time and say, I know that in the U.S. you have the Americans with Disabilities Act, you have all of these things, so, you must be much further ahead than we are. And the answer is it depends. Many countries around the world have quotas for hiring people with disabilities. where companies need to hire anywhere, depending on the country, between 2 and 8% of their employees to be people with disabilities. And when they don't, they pay fines, typically, to the country, to the government. So in that respect, other countries are ahead of us. It really depends on the country, because there's a lot of geography and geographic culture that plays into it. So as an example, Japan has a quota for hiring people with disabilities, but if the employees have learning disabilities, you can hire them, but they don't contribute to the quota. Whereas in the U.S., many, many companies are hiring people out of colleges and universities with learning disabilities. So there are different issues. In India, it's thought that if you have a child with a disability or you have one yourself, that, because of karma, you caused that to happen in some prior life in some way. So very, very different. But at the end of the day, when it comes to businesses and businesses hiring people with disabilities and employing them or marketing products and services, it's very much the same in that we have to be accommodating. We have to understand that people are people no matter whether they have a disability or not, and that people have all kinds of abilities. It's not just about someone being able to walk or speak orally.
Very interesting, because I would think customs and geography and limitations in the country all contribute to all of this. But
Yes.
you spent 20 years, as a corporate executive. So did that really set you on your way for what you're doing today? I mean, would someone who has not been able to do that, who had not had that background, would they have been as successful as you are?
It's actually quite funny when you think about what determines success. So because of spending 20 years in corporate, it certainly allowed me to say that the companies that we're serving in that corporate space make sense, because I understand that world. I understand that makeup. We're actually in the process of launching a small business division that will be run by someone who that is her background and experience. So I think that coming from corporate is not so much what determines the success, but rather what background, information, experiences you have that you can bring to the table relative to whatever business you're pursuing and customers you're pursuing. I think it is important that you understand the animal that you're trying to reach.
Well, what would you say were your greatest challenges and what were your greatest successes?
Greatest challenges, I think the first one was that what I had not realized was when I first started the business, I did not think about that I had spent 20 years in insurance and financial services, and that was not the business I was doing now. And I suddenly realized the first day that I sat at my new desk in my new office that I had no one to call. That I hadn't really thought through, because all of my contacts over all those years were insurance folks and financial services folks that weren't really the right contacts for me. So that was probably the first challenge. I think the next challenge coming from that corporate executive level is that I came into this expecting or just maybe experiencing a very large staff, right? I had admin, I had chief of staff, I had 600 plus people in my organization. So if I needed something, I knew who to call. I had a government relations team, I had a PR team. When you start your own company, at least for me, it was me, myself, and I.
And we all experience that, Nadine. It's interesting. I think that is, with all the people I've spoken with and many of the people that I've coached, the one thing that really has been a sticking point for a majority of them has been going from that corporate environment of we have all these people at our fingertips to I'm sitting at my desk and I have to do everything. Yes. And that has been a mental challenge. It has really been a mental challenge, even more than a financial challenge, a mental challenge. Yes. So how did you get over that? How did you start the flow?
So I went back to thinking about, I'm not going to have people overnight, right? You have to generate business and revenue to do that, and that will provide you the opportunity to bring folks in. So the first thing that I did was think about what things that I did in a corporate environment that were successful, that made me successful, made my team successful, that I could transfer to this business. And what I realized was in my corporate experience, I did an extensive amount of public speaking. I was PR trained and did a lot of speaking engagements, did a lot of media interviews. And so what I realized was that was the place to start. And it was, identifying resources and organizations where I could go speak and educate folks on what the business was and why it was important to them in their world. And that's really what kickstarted it. And I have to say that probably from the time, I would say maybe by the time we were a year and a half, 2 years into it, almost all of our business came from referrals and from those presentations.
Well, I mean, you have made some kind of growth spurt in 10 years from sitting at your desk all by yourself. Now you are a global organization putting on conferences all over the world, and your influence is all over the world. So tell us a little bit about your successes.
So, I think the success is in helping folks understand how to solve problems. One, helping folks understand that they have a problem or have a need, and not just identifying that, but showing that you have tangible and scalable solutions. Just presenting a problem to a corporate person just puts another thing on their plate, and it frustrates them. If you reinforce and help them understand a problem or an issue that they have, or maybe they didn't know they had, but then say, here are the scalable solutions. One of the things we talk about is that while the legal implications are important, it's the practical, everyday applications that are critical. So the success that we have is for taking that, is for simplifying very complex issues around disability regulations and such, and making it, so not only is it simple, less overwhelming for the corporate execs or for the business owners, but it can show them how they can do this in a sweet, short, and successful way. So that, they weren't thinking about this yesterday. Today they learn they have a problem, and they're generating revenue from it or eliminating expense from it tomorrow.
That's a great philosophy. So what would you say then? Would you say that problem solving is the key to building a business?
I think problem solving, but doing it in a way that aligns with in my case, the culture. So it aligns with the culture of my client. So for any business, how does your solution align with either their corporate culture, their business culture, their geographic culture? Depending on the business you're in, you have to understand that at its core, so the solution is really aligned with that. Otherwise, it's just more a menu you're presenting of potential solutions, and you're leaving someone to figure it out for themselves.
So what is the key difference then in working with these large companies, so companies that really have to mind their P's and Q's, and working with a small company who really needs to do the same but may not have the same kind of resources?
Yeah, so the difference is this. Again, it's knowing the animal. So certainly as a small business owner, I understand some of the unique needs of a small business owner. So the law might be the same. So we have new legislation that went into effect March of last year that if a company, whether small business or large, is a U.S. federal contractor, meaning that they generate at least $10,000 in revenue from a federal government, that they are now under obligations that 7% of their workforce must be people with disabilities. They're under obligations around self-disclosure and self-ID of people with disabilities, around training, tracking. There's a whole series of regulations. Or even if a small business has more than 15 employees, there's other regulations. It's helping them understand how it applies to them. So yes, it's the same rule for a company with 100,000 employees as it is, let's say, for a company with 50. But at the end of the day, the way they are going to achieve that compliance and achieve that success will be very different. We need to be able to come in a way that we're not giving the same guidance to both of those businesses. The basics are the same, but the way in which they are going to execute are going to be very different. That's the key. So it's not just the problem solving generically, but problem solving relative to the size, scope, and needs of their business.
Interesting. Well, let me ask you,